you, and hopefully by the time you walk out of a very special gate, you will have that connection with Madiba and his legacy. Some of the information that I'm about to share with you are well known, others, however, is Drakenstein specific. Now, let me just tell you, this farm, I mentioned to you earlier, 402 hectares. Now, way back in the 1960s, it used to be 4 different farms, and one of the farms belonged to a gentleman called Victor Verster. So he sold the property to government, and since 1 January 1963 up till 1998, these 4 farms collectively became known as Victor Verster Prison, where the great Tata Madiba walked out. We changed the name in 1998 because we said we want to reflect on the transformation that took place since he walked through our gates. So we changed the name in accordance with the mountain that side, which is the Drakenstein mountain, and we became Drakenstein Correctional Services. But in the same year of 1998, Madiba turned 80 and got married on his 80th birthday to Mama Grasa and myself. So a few months later, he brought her here. We were super keen to tell him that we changed the name, and we gave our reasons. He said, thank you, but I would not mind if you revert back to the name Victor Verster, because the name for me has a total different meaning. So today, although on paper officially still Drakenstein, we are really comfortable both Drakenstein and Victor Verster. So officially from my side, welcome to both. All right. Now the Mandela story. I will go way back. 18 July 1918. This young lad Rolihlahla Mandela was born, and the meaning of his birth name is twofold. First, it means to pull a branch of a tree, and secondly, troublemaker. How fittingly. So up till the age of 1, Mr. Mandela, and we do call him on his clan name Madiba, and sometimes Tata, which means father, he stayed with both parents. But by then his father Henry was a chief in that tribe, the Xhosa Royal Temple tribe. So when he turned 1, Henry said, I want to have a party, a celebration. But somebody alleged he did something wrong. He then appeared in front of a white magistrate at the time. The two of them have a disagreement, and next thing, the magistrate said, you are disrespectful, and your sentence will be, you'll be stripped from your chieftainship. Very harsh. The moment they did that, it meant they took away all privileges. So at a time, Henry had 3 wives. The rule was and still is, you can have as many wives as you want, as long as you can afford everybody equally. So when they took that away, Henry requested Mr. Mandela's mother and her children to move away from this very small village where they stayed called Mvezu, to move about 30 kilometers south to a smaller village known as Kunu. So there they went. The next 6 years, nothing important happened. But when Tata turned 7, his mother said, I want my children, and of course my eldest boy, to get the best possible education. But she said it need to be in line with my religion, because she was a Christian and part of the Methodist faith. Fortunately for her, there was a missionary school from Great Britain nearby. She sent him there. When he arrived there was this teacher, Jolingwana. She said, according to the rules of this school, I need to give every child in my class an English name. She said, but not just any English name. It need to reflect a British imperial hero. So when she saw the 7-year-old boy, she said, Admiral Nelson. That's how Madiba got his English name, all right? Now fast forward, he was good at school. Then he went to university, the University of Fort Hare. And whilst being there, Tata became known for 2 things. 1, ballroom dancing. He in fact joined the ballroom fraternity at the time. And secondly, cross-country running. Years later, he became known for his boxing as well. He was there for just over 4 years, together with his nephew Justice. I can tell you, according to the record, apart from the fact that they were family, they were great friends. But 4 years later, Justice's father called him, said, guys, I'm getting old and you're getting big, please get married. The problem was, it was arranged marriages, meaning your wife will be chosen on your behalf. They didn't like it, but what can they do? When they identified the ladies, the one they chose for Mr. Mandela, sadly, was in love with his nephew Justice. So Justice and Madiba came together and said this will not work. So 5 months later, they did something silly. They stole a cow, they sold it, took the money, bought train tickets, and they flew off to Johannesburg to escape marriage. He went to stay in the Alexandria Township. He got to work as a so-called mine policeman, a security officer, and then he met many people. And one of them that he befriended sold property, a real estate agent, Walter Sisulu. And Walter was the one who inspired him to study law. He then enrolled University of Witwatersrand. But in 1943, he came to visit Walter at home, and Walter's beautiful niece came to visit, a young professional nurse, Evelyn Massey. When they saw each other, well, sparks everywhere. So in 1944, they got married, they had children. In the meantime, completed his law degree, and then he started off the first black lawyer firm in South Africa, together with his old friend Oliver Tambo. Now Oliver was really running the Saudi office, but Mr. Mandela became the face of this law firm, using all the tricks in the book to win his cases. And allow me today to cite you this one example. Now I must apologize to all of you, this is not a good one, but it's the truth. One day an African domestic worker was charged. Somebody alleged he stole a madam's clothing. She denied, he said, I didn't do it. They said, well, get yourself a lawyer. Mr. Mandela became the lawyer. So come court day, there were all the clothing that were allegedly stolen. He simply took a pencil, he went through everything, and then he lifted up one of the panties, the underwear that lay there, and he showed it to this white lady at the time. He said, ma'am, can you confidently convince this court that this piece of underwear indeed belongs to you? Very embarrassingly, the lady approached the magistrate. She said, how dare you allow this black man to talk to me like this? Must I respond to his question? So, well, this is court, part of procedure. Yes, you have to. She said, if this is the case, let me put on record, I'm dropping the case against her and I will walk out, which he did. Madiba won his case. And that was a key turning point in his career, because suddenly people heard about it. They were now inundated with work. Only black lawyer firm didn't charge the same rates as other law firms. But the problem was, he spent a lot of time away from home. So his eldest boy, Tembile, one day went to his mother, said, Mom, where does Derry really stay? We hardly ever see him at home. He's not even taking me for boxing classes anymore. Evelyn confronted him. She said, you better make up your mind. It's either your career, your politics, or your family life. But I cannot live with this. So for the next 6 months, Madiba was under the radar. 6 months later, they caught him for a minor political offense, exciting the revulsion of society. And he sentenced 3 years under house arrest, which was ideal because every day he was allowed to go and work, but at night he must stay at home. So everything was hunky-dory for that 3-year period. When they lifted the ban 3 years later, he went full force. 1955-56, the treason trial, which he was acquitted from. But midway 1957, Evelyn said, sorry, but this is where we'll draw the line. In early 1958, they got divorced. 6 months later, they drove past a bus stop, and they saw another beautiful lady. This time around, a social worker, 18 years younger than he was at the time, Winifred Matikizela. And the rest is really history. He and Mama Winnie got married and stayed married for nearly 38 years, of which we all know today for 27 of those they were not together. But sadly, folks, by the time Tata walked out of this house, 11 February 1990, they were two different people altogether in terms of what they want and how to pursue it. And 2 years after his release, 1992, they split up, and of course, in 1996, they got divorced. 1960 was a very terrible year in South African history. One incident we refer to is as the Sharpeville Massacre. People of color, and specifically African ladies, they were forced to carry around a little pass whenever they want to enter town or places. And they yelled at demonstrations. They said, enough is enough. And they piled everything down, and some of the security police gunned them down. So later that year, the leadership of the Greater Liberation Movement came together. They said, up till now, we tried everything to avoid violence, but it's clear the government is not playing by the same rules. So another year later, December 61, they made a decision to establish the military wing of the ANC called Umkhonto we Sizwe, the spear of the nation. And Mr. Mandela became the co-commander. They went for military training, Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, Morocco, Algeria. He spent 16 months outside of our borders. During that 16-month period, he was labeled by the media in South Africa as the Black Pimpernel, based on Scarlet Pimpernel. Then he returned to South Africa in 62. He drove from our northern border by car all the way to Durban, where he informed the leaders of the plans and strategies. But on his way back home to Mama Winnie and the children, August the 5th, 1962, at a roadblock small village called Howick, the police caught him. One of his own people betrayed him. They put him in a police cell for 2 weeks before they sent him off to Robben Island. 2 weeks later, they sent him back for the trial. They found him guilty. They gave him a 5-year term of imprisonment. And whilst in prison in Pretoria, they caught 20 people on a farm, Liliesleaf, north of Johannesburg, in an area known as Rivonia. And on the 20th of April 1964, out of the whole group, 8 people were convicted for security-related crimes. One of them was a white guy called Dennis Goldberg. That day, Tata made a 3.5-hour-long speech, known today for us as the speech from the dock. He said many things, but most importantly, and I'm paraphrasing now, he said, I fought against white domination, and I fought against black domination. Then he said, this is an ideal which I cherish and hope to achieve being alive. but if needs be, I'm prepared to die for it. And all 8 of them accepted. They will most probably get a death penalty. The judge asked for mitigating factors. They said no. What we did, we are prepared to do again, because we're not criminals. We just asked for equal treatment. So they went back to Pretoria and returned the 12th of June 64 to be sentenced. The night before, one of his attorneys, George Bizos, he received a call from a guy high up in Britain. He said, go to Nelson and the rest and inform them they need not to worry. They will not get the death penalty. George didn't believe. What's the chance? He knew the system, hence he didn't even bother to relay the message. And to the surprise of everybody, the following morning, the judge ruled life imprisonment. So out of the 8 people, they sent 7 to Robben Island. Dennis, being white, not allowed. He went to Pretoria, later to Johannesburg, where he served 23 years altogether. When they arrived at Robben Island, Madiba was no longer the Black Pimpernel. He was now enemy number 1 of government. And the person in charge of security, my former colleague Colonel Okamp, he grabbed Madiba by the arm, he walked a few meters and he told him, you will not walk out of prison alive. We will damn make sure about that. And that's the true reason, confirmed by him, 27 years later, never part of any discussion. On the day of his release, 18 yards before our access gate, he stopped the car, he got out, Mama Winnie followed, and he walked out of prison to show that man, I'm alive and I'm walking out. And I can tell you today, it was a great security nightmare, because they really feared for his life, but he needed to do that. Back on the island, and I will not go into detail, but I think we all know it was a very difficult time. But suffice to say, they survived everything. But 10 years later, they were together in the dining hall, and one of them made a proposal to him. Why don't you start to draw down your story and our story, in case anything happened, that we just have a record? He agreed. What he did subsequently, pretended to be sick during the day in order to sleep and rest. And at night, he written most of the chapters of the book now called Long Walk to Freedom. In the mornings, he handed over to 3 of his friends. One of them have this tiny, beautiful handwriting. They rewritten everything, 8 pages into one, and then they used the plastic which they gathered from the peanut butter. They put it inside and they buried it in the vegetable garden where he was so fond of working. Well, 4.5 years later, one morning, they heard this noise. They looked through the prison bars. They saw a group of inmates from the building division side try to dig a trench to wreck a wall, and that trench happened to go through the vegetable garden. They discovered most of the manuscripts. From that moment onwards, government denied them all privileges. Not even International Red Cross was able to visit them. Fortunately, one of them, Mac Margaret, smuggled some of the stuff at the back of a photo album. By then, many sad things in South Africa. Up till 1982, 18 years on the island, government said, we need to take the leaders of the ANC away from the island because they are now influencing the younger ones coming in. So out of the 7, they took 6. One person remained, Govan Mbeki, our former President Thabo Mbeki's father. They said he's the key communist. The other 6, they took to a prison in Cape Town called Polsmoor. When they arrived there, their prison cell was in the maximum prison, 3 stories high, but their cell was in the roof area, not conducive for any human being to stay. Bitterly cold in the winter, excessive heat in the summer, and because of that, Tata often ended up in the public hospitals. And some of the doctors made recommendations. Either you upgrade that cell, or you transfer him to a different place, because if anything happened to him, chaos outside. They listened, but only to a certain degree. They took him from the communal cell 3 stories high. They placed him downstairs in a single cell, but with one condition though. Each time when he wanted to see his friend just a few meters higher, he now need to apply in writing. They take that application and they send it to Pretoria, 1,500 kilometers more or less, and somebody there will respond, which never happened. So many more things happened. By 1985, because of international pressure and domestic problems, he was summoned to the office of the state president, P.W. Botha. And P.W. Botha offered his freedom, but with conditions. Mr. Mandela said, thank you, but no thank you. He went back to his prison cell. He wrote a letter, and he managed to smuggle that letter out. And his daughter Zinzi from Mama Winnie's side read it on his behalf on Orlando Stadium, Soweto, where he basically said, my freedom can never ever be separated from yours. They offered freedom, but look at these conditions. I would rather die in prison. So he remained there. More things happened, but by 1987, something important happened. The universities of Columbia and California persuaded President Reagan also to impose sanctions against South Africa. And suddenly in Europe, America, now more countries, there was this Free Mandela movement as well as divestment. You were not even allowed to buy a simple thing like a Granny Smith apple. In the UK, they told the people you don't bank at Barclays Bank because of the operations in South Africa. And government got the message. It's no longer only politically, it's also economically.
Hit them with
They
the
said we
pockets.
need to take this man away, isolate him, hopefully start with discussions that he can calm the situation in the country because it became unbearable. So finally, folks, 7 December 88, he found himself in Constantia Berg Clinic, Cape Town. They sent a car, they told him get in, will be transferred. They did not tell him why or where to. The only thing that he had with him was a little radio and his private clothing. And they brought him to Victor Verster prison. It was at night. They used the same back road that we just traveled now. He could see they passed the houses, he was fine. But the moment they passed prison, he began to worry because they didn't stop. They just kept on driving. When they stopped here, it was nearly 10:30 in the evening. Tata thought, surely, given this remote area, the secrecy, they will possibly execute me tonight. He couldn't believe when they told him this is your new residence. So what government did? They declared this whole area above our premises as a no-flying zone because they feared somebody can fly over, drop a bomb, should he die as a result of it, elevated to the status of a martyr, which they could not afford. The house I'm about to show you was not built for him. It was a farmer's house before the prison took it over. So they only decided to tint some of the windows. We call it one-sided mirrors. You can see from inside out, but from the outside you can't look through. The little White House next door was specifically built for security purposes. It was from that venue where they did all the surveillances, where his meals were prepared, where the staff stayed over for night duty. So everything happened from there. Tata stayed alone in this house for 14 months. During that period, he was able to walk around freely inside the house, inside the garden area, and nothing further than that. Then in 1989, our former president P.W. Botha suffered a stroke, and F.W. de Klerk took over. Both of them never came here. They always sent their senior ministers or top administrators. When they came here, or when they took Madiba on many, many secret drives, they always utilized that access gate. And because of that, the staff and residents that side had no idea that he was detained here. It was one of those best kept secrets ever. Alright? Now, before we move, the staff who work with him, I need to tell you about them. They were the best at the time. Can't deny that. Many of them came from Robben Island via Portsmouth to this prison. But all of them were white, Afrikaans-speaking male officers. And initially, even here, they were a bit hostile towards Madiba. But today, I don't want to tell you about the hostilities. I want to tell you about the changes that came upon in that 14-month period. Tata's on record, he said, I never engaged into any politics with these ordinary officers. I left it for the politicians. But he often approached them. There were a few times he walked to some of them, he said, I believe it's your birthday. I heard from your colleague, it's your wife's birthday. Here's a card that I made. And he wrote a message in Afrikaans, also my mother tongue. Other instances, he approached them, said, you're studying, can I support you, can I assist you? But in 1989, he went to one senior white officer. He said, sir, the past few months I witnessed, you have a lot of potential. But I heard from your colleagues, you only passed standard 8, which is a low grade. He said, please don't be satisfied. Study hard, obtain your degree, because one day you will need this. And he meant well. This guy was so cross. How dare you? I'm your superior, don't tell me anything. Madiba was sad because he meant well, so he left him alone. Years later, 1996, Tata returned to this facility the third time after his release. By then, our president. He stopped at that access gate, we were lined up, he came and greeted us individually, and then he went and addressed us. After he spoke, that same man who was so rude in 1989, he sat 2 chairs away from me, he stood up. He said, please allow me to say something. They allowed him. He said, today I'm an assistant director. I'm the head of all the staff at this facility, and I have 2 degrees behind my name. And he pointed to Tata, said, you inspired me. That was the most amazing
Beautiful.
feeling, knowing the history between them. That guy retired only 2 years ago. A second one, and this guy is well known. His name is Jack Swart. Now Jack became the famous chef or cook here. But before he became the cook, way back at Robben Island, young officer, his job was to drive the truck between the prison and the lime quarry. And his instructions were, drive as reckless as you can. He said, Manfred, at times I aimed for the speed bumps. They fell from the one side to the other side. He said, one day I drove so recklessly, Tata sitting in the back, knocked on the window and told him in Afrikaans, can't you drive better? We're not pack of corn. We call it here millies. He said, I just glanced at him and kept on driving. Years later, 88, the local commander brought Jack Swart here, introduced him to Madiba and said, this will be your cook. Madiba started to laugh. So why are you laughing? He said, officer, I hope you will be a better cook than you were driver. Jack said, I couldn't believe. I thought, surely, for what we did, he will try to get us back. On the contrary, over that 14 months, they became so close. In fact, Tata said, he became like a younger brother to me. 2nd February 1990, former President de Klerk made those major announcements about his release and a few things more. 3 days later, at his house once again, the great Nelson Mandela walked to Jack Swart. He said, I don't know what will happen now, but one day, if I have the privilege to become part of the leadership of this beautiful country, I would love that you and your wife share that special moment with me. 10 May 94 came. He was inaugurated as our president. Jack Swart and his wife was then Pretoria amongst all those dignitaries. Jack was a warrant officer, low-grade officer. When he returned, Tata said, make sure he got promotion, and he became a lieutenant. Today, Uncle Jack is in retirement. But personally, I never came across a guy more humble than Jack Swart, really. A last one quickly, and he's still working here. His name is Johan Hatter. He came to me one day. He said, shamefully and regretfully, I must admit to you, I was possibly one of the most racist guys ever. He in fact belonged to this far-right organization called Afrikaner Weerstand Beweging. He said, but one day in 89, he was so bored, he decided to bring a little boogie board and try to teach Mr. Mandela how to swim in the swimming pool. The day Madiba walked out of this house, he was in the vehicle that side. He said, I forgot something. He quickly went inside, fetched the FM radio and that boogie board. He said, this is near to my heart. But the best of all, pardon me, that racist guy, today is married to a colored lady. That's the victory. And that's the changes. So today, the house is exactly as he left it. The furniture inside are all the original, except for the paintings and the photo exhibition, which I will explain. But just before we go, you know, you might not be aware, possibly you are, but when Mr. Mandela came here in 1988, many of his own people, even in leadership positions, thought he have sold them out. In fact, they told him, you don't have a mandate to talk to white people. We will take up our arms and we will fight till the bitter end. He said, don't be foolish. If you want to change people, don't attack their brains, rather attack their hearts. He said, because once you're in their hearts, then you can start to move the furniture, so to speak. There's a time they said, Nkosi Sikelele Africa, which means God bless Africa, will be our national anthem. Nothing else. He said, fine, but first convince me. Why do you want to exclude people? Today, I'm proud to tell you, we have 5 languages within our national anthem. Late 95, we walk into a church in Johannesburg, and a group of young kids start to sing our beautiful anthem. When they're supposed to move from Xhosa to Afrikaans, they simply continue Xhosa. He stopped them right there. He said, either you sing it as you're supposed to sing it, or you don't sing it at all, because I represent everybody in this country. Needless to tell you, they had to do it right. A while ago, most of the commercial banks in our area, at the point of entry, there were always 2 doors. You were never allowed to open the door in front of you if you don't close the one behind you. Now, funny enough, that's also life. Sometimes we don't progress because of baggage. Now, I need to be sensitive here. People in South Africa will tell you, my friend there, people lost their lives, people lost their dignity, people lost their right to vote, people lost their land, which all might be true. But the great Nelson Mandela taught us something differently. He said, when I walk out of the gates at Victor Verster, I realized if I have to walk out here still being angry, still being bitter, I would remain a prisoner. So to let go, far more important. All right? So now we'll go inside. I can just say to you this.